ahead and get started as we are going live. Yes, this is exciting, very exciting. I want to thank you all for coming. My name is Kaya Morris, and I'm the director of the Alliance for Community Transformations. I'm actually here today to welcome you all and thank you so much for being a part of this really important conversation. This is your community forum, and today we're talking about opiate abuse in Bennington County. Now, as we know, this is not a problem that's just taking place here in Bennington. This is a nationwide problem. It's something that began years ago, and we're feeling the effects in full force today. What we're doing here today is we're trying to initiate not only a dialogue, but action. What can we as a community, what can we as individuals, what can we as organizations do to impact opiate abuse and its effects on our communities? Now, I'm one person, but I'm not the only one that's a part of this. As you'll see around the room today, we have several different organizations that are doing work in this community, in the next community over, sometimes even on a regional basis between states, to all try to have an impact on this. Within that, I want to ask you to consider, what can I do? Is there something that I can do beyond volunteering even? Perhaps I can give my time, perhaps I can provide services, perhaps I can donate money, perhaps I can help initiate something very unique and meaningful. I have with me today here Sadie Fischescher, who is the field director for the Agency of Human Services for the Bennington and Brattleboro offices. And it's great that she's here again because we're talking about a regional approach. And as we're broadcasting today, both on CAT TV and on GNAT, we're trying to send a strong message that we're all in this together. So please, as we go through this journey today, you're going to hear some things, you're going to learn some things, but we also want to learn from you and we want to hear from you as well. So thank you for being a part of this. And I'd like to welcome Sadie.
Thanks, Kaya. I'm just very happy to be here to represent the Secretary of our Agency of Human Services, Dr. Harry Chen. He, as you might know, came from the Department of Health. He has a background as an emergency room doctor, so he has seen the issues that face people who are in the throes of addiction at the crisis stage. He's also worked in a halfway house for young women who are suffering from addiction, so he's seen a far age spread and he's seen the reach. And I know that here in our community, we see that the impacts in all sectors of our society in many different ways. Some of them are subtle and are silent, others are obvious and louder and get some attention. So it's really important to have all of you here to tell your stories and tell us what you see and how you and your families are being impacted and how our community can respond. I also really want to thank all of the people listed on the back of your program, all of the agencies, organizations, and really the individuals who were responsible for getting this forum together and keeping our community moving forward as we try to come up with solutions tonight about what we can do to make a difference for ourselves and our entire community. So thank you very much for coming. Thank them very much, especially the collaborative for working on this with ACT, and all of those people on the back of your program have been important in getting this together. So thanks very much.
Thank you, Sadie, for that. So I wanted to now take a quick moment to introduce some of our special speakers that we have today. They're going to paint a very clear picture for you as to what this looks like in our county. I think we all have sort of stereotypes or ideas in our heads of what addiction looks like, what it feels like, what it means, who it impacts. And we're going to break that a little bit for you. So we have some individuals here today that I think you'll really enjoy hearing from. The first is Dr. Nels Kloster. Dr. Kloster, for the past 10 years, has worked throughout Vermont at all levels of addiction treatment. In addition to his recovery center here in Bennington, he is currently the medical director for the Methadone Clinic in Brattleboro and at Serenity House Residential Treatment Center in Wallingford. He has been guided by the principle that addiction is a complicated illness that not only impacts individuals, but our entire community. Because of this, he is dedicated to providing long-term treatment and working with agencies that offer the variety of supports that are necessary for recovery. We also are going to have joining us as well, and I want to make sure to introduce her so that you'll hear her story as well. We have Mariah Johnson, who's joining us today. And as a 26-year-old Vermonter, Mariah has been struggling with the ins and outs of a hidden opiate addiction for years. Starting with prescription opiates for pain management after a car accident, she quickly stepped up to IV drugs. Feeling hopeless with nowhere to turn, sobriety was nothing short of impossible. With the support of a loving fiancé and her 2 small children, a little education about opioid replacement therapy, she's now 16 months sober and with a new hope for the future. So thank you both.
I'd just have to say I feel honored to sort of represent the addiction treatment community in doing this. So I guess folks have heard Bennington might have a drug problem. So does Brattleboro, so does Burlington, really it's throughout all the towns in Vermont. We had the same issue in New Hampshire, in Massachusetts, in New York. It's safe to say, as Kai had mentioned, this is a national problem. It's also a national problem in other places I know. It's a national problem in Norway, the Netherlands, France. It's a problem in Iran, in Iraq, in Afghanistan. It's also a problem in Australia and New Zealand. I think it's safe to say that this is clearly a worldwide problem. Also, going back to China in the early 1900s, 1906 to be precise, it was estimated that 1/4 or 25% of every Chinese adult man was addicted to opium. Opium being another form of opiates we have today, precursor to heroin. So I don't frame it in this way to be pessimistic, but rather to be realistic about the issue that we're facing. This is not some fad. It's not a short-term issue. It's everywhere, and it has been present throughout all time. And the reason why I bring that up is because it's not going to be some quick fix for us to address this in our community. This is going to require sustained effort to make the kind of changes that are necessary to decrease the presence of addiction in our community. And I think that we know that whatever we do to decrease the presence of addiction in our community is also going to strengthen the health of our community, the resiliency, the vibrancy of Bennington as well. And as Paul, I've heard you say this, and I think I've heard every police chief in Vermont and farther say this, we can't arrest our way out of this problem. And something I've read recently as well suggested that with the current system we can't treat our way out of this problem either. So this is clearly not solely a problem for the legal system, it's not solely a problem for the medical system, it's not solely the responsibility of our schools, nor is it simply a responsibility of our business community. This is something that we all have felt the repercussions of, and it's something that we can all play a role in helping. So while this problem might not be unique in any way, Vermont is way ahead of the curve on this, and Bennington could very well be a community that does something unique that could serve as a model to other communities throughout Vermont, throughout the U.S. Now, I always use these opportunities to sort of do a little bit of education, or if you will, to normalize what it means to be addicted. I think the light bulb went off for me when I was in medical school, and I realized that addiction was not simply that people were doing these drugs to feel good. When people get to the point of addiction, what they're really doing is they're trying not to feel sick. One thing we know about addictive substances is they feel good, and they feel good quickly. You can feel the impact of them very shortly after you use them. There are receptors in the brain that the molecules fit into. So we talk about, I don't want to get too technical, but so adenosine receptors where caffeine goes, nicotine receptors or where the nicotine from cigarettes goes. We actually have cannabinoid receptors. The system lights up when you smoke marijuana. And we have, no quiz on this, but the GABAergic system is where alcohol works. And of course, even the opiate receptors are where opiates happen to work. So we know from, coffee, you feel the effects pretty soon, you're stimulated, you're awake, you're good to go. Alcohol tends to relax people, and we know that opioids have the effect of certainly decreasing pain, and even too giving a sense of euphoria as well. So what we know is while some people might start off to sort of have fun or relief in using these substances, that what happens over time is that the receptors change. The conformation, the shape of them can change, the number of them can change, and the way they impact that receptor system can also change. So what happens is people are no longer using these substances to feel good, but to stop feeling sick. I think safe to say a number of us here, if we go without our caffeine in the morning, know that by 10 o'clock, maybe by noon, that headache's probably coming on. We maybe feel not quite so sharp and quick, feeling a little tired. People who smoke, when they don't get their cigarettes, they realize, okay, you have the cravings for that, you might have a headache, you're quite irritable as well. And from alcohol, and people, sweats, shakes, stomach upset, hearing changes, vision changes. And the worst case scenarios, people can have seizures and die from alcohol withdrawal. Now, opiates is a little bit different, more like a very intense flu. So while people aren't at risk of dying from opiate withdrawal, what they'll often say is, I wish I would, because it's such an awful, awful flu. And if you think back to having, I'm sure we've all had a flu, we felt out of sorts, very miserable for days, maybe even a week. And what we hear is, okay, take this antibiotic, get some rest, drink a lot of fluids, you might feel better in a few days, maybe a week. I want you to imagine if instead what I said to you as a doctor is, I've got this magic pill. And when you start to feel this awful flu, I can give you this pill, and within an hour at the latest, you're going to feel good. So this is the situation that opiate-dependent people get into. People are addicted to opiates. What happens is they get to a point where it's no longer fun, it's no longer relief, it becomes a need. And they're feeling this flu, they know this flu is coming on many times a day, and they start to try to protect against that flu. Then they get to the point where they try to protect against the fear of having this thing, and eventually their whole life just sort of narrows down to the pursuit of this substance that's going to keep them from getting sick. And so what happens at this point, and which is an issue with getting into addiction and an issue that happens with addiction, is your social networks, your tie to the community is absolutely devastated. And so we know that when people become addicted, they lose their social supports, they lose the love of people that are very important to them. And this can either happen after addiction, or certain situations like this could actually be the case before people develop addiction, which leaves us sort of prone for that. Now, one of the things we're going to talk about tonight is risk factors and protective factors. When we talk about these things, we're really talking about sort of a community-wide impact. So we talk about decreasing the risk, we're talking about maybe having, say, 1 in 10 instead of 1 in 5 people. We really can't point to an individual person and say, okay, these are the things that are going to stop you from becoming addicted. We know that these things sort of as a whole, as a clump, are quite, sort of predictive or indicative, but then too, I've met a number of people who say, look, I have no idea why I'm addicted. My childhood was wonderful. I had all kinds of opportunities, and then I started using drugs, and I got just hooked in, sucked into it, and away I went. So I want to make sure that we're doing this, nobody here is feeling a sense of shame when we talk about this, and everybody's realizing that, in many cases, there but for the grace of God go I. So, but the general idea when we talk about these things, we talk about prevention. We talk about sort of primary prevention. I think people are familiar with that when you think about vaccinations. We give our children the MMR, or measles, mumps, rubella vaccine, because we don't want them to have measles or mumps or rubella. So we talk about what protective factors. We want to think about things that help strengthen a community and a family and an individual to help them not struggle with drugs and addiction. And then we'll talk about sort of a later stage of prevention. You call it tertiary prevention, or sort of third level of prevention. You could also call this treatment. The idea at that stage is that you are simply trying to protect people from dying early, trying to help them to live with their illness. And just like cancers and diabetes, when we talk about addiction, we consider it to be a lifelong condition, and one that we're trying to sort of protect people from relapses and help people develop a quality of their life to overcome their addiction. I would suggest that many people missed it earlier this month, but a movie called The Anonymous People really speaks about people in recovery and functioning well and being very productive members of their communities. So one of the things treatment works. There is a cost to the community, and there's a cost to our society to not offer treatment. It is cheaper to offer treatment. Any estimate that I've seen around the economics of this, the most miserly one I saw said that for every dollar invested in treatment, you get $1.80 in payback from that. More generous estimates around, say, methadone treatment and around substance abuse treatment in general will get as high as $4 payback to $7 payback for every dollar invested. If you look at the war on drugs, which we're all trying to distance ourselves from now, the best return you ever gotten on the dollar invested in that was maybe 75 cents, and more like 50 to 35 cents. You wouldn't want to put your retirement fund in a fund that got you that kind of return. So we know that it works, and one thing too we want to do is try to prevent people from becoming addicted. So I want to leave you sort of two messages around what we can do as far as protection is delay the first use. The later people use any kind of substance, the less likely they are to suffer with addiction. We know that with alcohol, that if you start drinking at 14, you have a 50% chance of becoming an alcoholic. If you wait until you're 21 years old, that chance goes down to about 10%, which is really the risk for the general population. So it's very important we stop that first use. I mean, if you could imagine, there's so much learning, there's so much you're developing in the beginning. If you get off track that early, you can get farther and farther off track, and it's got devastating consequences for you. So that's kind of the key around this idea of primary prevention, is we've got to delay that first use. And then many things we're going to talk about with protective factors, risk factors, are around delaying that first use. And then on the other hand, if we're sort of the horses out of the barn, treatment works. So those are the two messages: delay that first use, and treatment works. And by treatment, that means talk therapy, counseling. I include methadone, Suboxone. I include 12 steps like AA and NA, Turning Point. There's so many things that are involved in treatment that has an impact that we know works. So one way we can look at how to engage in this is along the ideas of the primary prevention and treatment. We could also say, what can the system do and what can the individual do? And this is a big piece of what we're here to do tonight, is to decide what this community can do, what we can do to help individuals do what they need to do to prevent addiction, or also to encourage people to go to treatment, and the things that the system can do as well. One of the things that we have to do as a system, we have to take a long-term view. The idea, for example, is you go to rehab or you go to the hospital for detox, and then you come out and game over. I'll be polite, but that doesn't work, all right? Those short-term things are at best a starting point. There has to be treatment following that up. It has to go on for a long period of time. And we make the mistake of looking at that in the scope of weeks or months. We should really be talking about years or decades. We have people on methadone, Suboxone, for example, who've been on, it appears to be a lifelong medication. Some people, maybe a year or two. We don't know. It really has to be tailored so that we meet each family's needs. And this is another piece too. This is not just an individual problem. If we're simply treating the individual, we're missing a lot. Families have a dynamic. Families have a way of getting along. And face it, families are the backbone of our pack. We are pack animals. We have a pack of our family, we have a pack of our school, of our work, of our community. And we lose these social connections either through trauma or illness in our family or addiction itself. Then we lose that social bond, and that is really, if we want to think about an overarching theme for preventing and treating addiction, you've got to maintain that social bond, because that's the kind of animal that we are. And that's really where addiction is most devastating. So on a system-wide basis, we have to have a long-term view, we have to have the family involved. There's no such thing as too early. People criticize, socialized states, socialized medicine, but their idea of cradle-to-grave treatment is really essential to this idea of what we can do to prevent and to treat addiction. So we can't get enough early education. So groups like VACI, who have this sort of Let's Grow program, the school district here, they have a role to play in this as well. Detecting families. So I work with a number of new parents. And to be honest about it, we've decided we really should target their kids. They want to do a good job. Every parent wants to protect their children from what happened to them. And so that's the place to start, is right there in the very beginning. If you've noticed some risk factors like a family history, we need to reach out and help people. We have to be coordinated. Like I said, this is not just the police, it's not just the medical system. So I've done work with Sunrise, UCS, the police, the probation and parole department. Everybody has a role in a way to help the people who are addicted. I'm stealing this from education, but the idea that it takes a village to raise a child, I think, is central to this. We have to see ourselves as a village helping people who are addicted. So as far as then what we can do on the individual level, I think that if you have, you got to model behavior for your kids. If you smoke, your kids need to see you try to stop smoking cigarettes. You need to tell them you don't want to smoke. You need to go to your doctor for patches and gum. You need to stop smoking. If you're smoking marijuana, I would suggest you stop that too. I'm not going to make a political statement about what I think about legalization, but if you've got marijuana in your underwear drawer, your kids are going to find it and share it with their friends. All right, we need to delay the first use. If you get drunk every weekend, stop it. Your kids are going to see what you do with substances, and they're going to mimic that. So you have a role then to show them what is the right way, that they can have fun without using drugs, that drugs aren't a part of your family, and that you have family traditions that are important. And that being said, I shouldn't just talk about what you don't do. Let's talk about what you do. You gotta love your kids. Have dinner with them. Make sure that they understand that 9 times out of 10 they're home for dinner with you. But it's a conversation. I love my kids. I actually like talking to my kids. Make sure they know this table is a place where you guys talk and communicate, and they understand the love that you have for them. That is really, really critical. Get involved with your school. Know your teacher's first name. Volunteer in a classroom. This is part of forging a community and letting your children know that you really care and that you're a presence in their life. These are important things. And then getting into sort of the idea of treatment, you got to advocate for treatment. If you know that somebody in your family, somebody you care about, is struggling with addiction, don't ignore it. Find out where the treatment is. Encourage them to treatment. Do things that help them move along as opposed to enable them to continue using. Start to encourage addiction. Let's take away the idea of bad and good. It's simply a thing that is, and we need to do the things that need to be done. So I don't want to sort of go on about, I could do a long list of things we could possibly do, but let's just remember that treatment works, that we want to delay that first use, and that it takes a village to raise a child. Okay, so thank you.
Thank you.
Hi. I'm going to ask everyone to bear with me here a little bit. It's not entirely comfortable telling communities the story of how you ruined your life with drugs. And I'm also not a professional public speaker, and I'm not quite as elegant as Dr. Klosser, but I will do my best. Well, my name is Mariah Johnson, and I'm here to share the story of my relationship with opiates with you all. I like to start this off by saying it's not a pretty story. No addict stories usually are, but it is a lucky one. I didn't lose my children.
Help me out here.
Thank you. How about my tip? You know, thank you. But it is a lucky one. I haven't lost any children to the system. I haven't been in jail. I haven't robbed anybody. I didn't have to steal for my drugs. And more importantly, I'm still here, and too many people are not. Over the last several years of my life and during this affair with opiates, I've seen my mother and father struggle with their addiction, my mother with alcoholism, and my father with his addiction to prescription pills. I had a sister and a brother land themselves in prison due to opiates. My sister and my mother both lost a child to the system for being addicts. I had a family friend murdered over a drug deal. I've seen overdoses at hotels that I had to give CPR to the people, and I've seen multiple suicides during withdrawals, and these are people I knew personally. And that's nothing that has to do with my story, that's just things I've seen, and most of it before I even used. I started using at a little bit of an older age than most people. Growing up with addicts, and I knew the rights and the wrongs, and I was scared to end up in the position that they were in. I didn't want to see it. It was normal at my house for me to have friends over and hear my dad moaning and groaning and crunching up his pills. We would sit there and laugh at him, and it wasn't until I was in high school that I understood the gravity of the situation. Every morning he would get up, do his pills, do too many, and by the end of the month he would run out and be sick. And when Dr. Kloster talks about the flu, it's easy to say that, but it is a whole nother level. It's the flu on top of your wife leaving you, on top of you wanting to commit suicide, on top of all of your bones being broken, on top of every bad thing you can imagine in the world all at once. And I saw my dad go through that at the end of the month every month. He would lock us out of the house, tell us he was going to kill himself, and we wouldn't hear from him and had no way to reach him. During that time, I started to steal his pills. And the first of the month, when he would get them, I would take them. And at the end of the month, I would hide them. When he would get sick, I would be, "Ooh, there's a pill, Dad," and he would feel better. And this worked for a while. Well, one day in school, I had a friend notice a bag of Oxycontin 40s in my backpack. This friend had just moved here from New York City, knew what they were when nobody else in the school did, and immediately started offering me $15 a piece for these pills. I said no, they were my dad's, but I was a poor girl, and when he offered 20, I took it. So every month I would steal my dad's pills, sell a couple to this boy, and I would continue to keep enough for my father. Well, the one time this young man asked, and I only had enough for my dad, I got arrested in school that day for having drugs with intent to distribute them. That's when I stopped taking my dad's pills, indeed. I started using long after that. I think I was 21. I had just met Matt, my now fiance. We had our first son together. I had been clean that entire time. I had a ton of friends that were addicts, and I was adamant about being sober. I was a young mother. I was overwhelmed. I went down to see my mother, and opiates were everywhere. A couple times I tried to do a 5 or I tried to do a 10, and it just made me sick. I had no interest in it. And that's where that love affair ended. A couple years later, I got into a car accident. I won't get into many of the details of that, but it did land me in the ICU, some time there, some time in the hospital, and a large script of oxycodone to take home. I took them as prescribed. Soon enough, I was taking them as prescribed, but snorting them illegally. Soon, I would take sleeping pills to sleep through the night, so the pills that I would be able to take at night, I would be able to snort in the morning. I drug on the first 5-day prescription, and was able to keep getting these pills that I should have gotten for 5 days for over 8 months. At that point, me and my primary care physician decided it was time for me to get off the opiates. I stopped getting the prescriptions, but I couldn't stop getting the pills. This time I started to buy them on the streets. I was working, I had the money, everything was going all right, I was raising my kid, and hey, I wasn't doing heroin, right? So I thought it was okay. It wasn't okay. Soon enough, the pharmaceutical companies tried to make the pills abuse-proof. You can beat that system if you're a chemist, if you want to waste 5 hours cooking and freezing your pills and wasting half of them. But everyone encouraged me, just do heroin, it's cheaper, just do it. And I refused to. I wasn't going to get addicted to something else like I was to pills. I remember the final 40 I did before I couldn't find anymore. It was 2 days in, and I was sicker than I had ever been in my life. And my housemate had got a vial of 1 gram of heroin. I stared at that vial for 3 hours, telling myself not to do it. Telling myself that I wouldn't do it, I was going to get through it, this was going to be fine, but my addiction had won. And that was the first time that I did a line. And I started doing heroin from there on out, and I didn't do many pills after that at all, even when they were available to me. Heroin was stronger, it was cheaper, and it was readily available. But it was still okay, I was working, and hey, I wasn't shooting up. So I had something going for me. Well, that didn't last forever. You know, the money started getting tighter, it didn't stretch as far. I started needing more to get high, I started running out more often. And then one of my lovely friends told me, you know, one of those bags would be the equivalent of 7 if you injected it. I wasn't gonna do that. So I didn't do it. I continued to snort my bags and continued to snort my bags till one day I was headed to work, and I worked a very labor-intensive job, and I saved my one bag until I needed it because I knew things were gonna get bad. And in the back of my head, I'm like, this could really help me. Like, one bag probably won't even get me unsick, and it certainly will not make me better. Well, my fiance happened to be a vet tech who had needles in the bathroom, and that was the first time that I shot up. I couldn't have gotten that high if I did 8 bags. It didn't last half as long, but it gave me a rush that I could not believe. It was something I had never felt in my life, and you feel it once and you chase it forever, and you'll never ever get that again. At that point, I knew I lost any grasp on the control of my addiction that I had. I had no way to stop it, and Dr. Klosser's right when he says that your addiction is mainly about the fear of being sick. I didn't want to use anymore, I didn't want to get high anymore, but I would have panic attacks while I was getting high because I knew that that was my last dose of the drug. I would drive state to state to get stuff. I have illegally sold guns to get stuff. I wasn't very proud of myself at the time. I did my best to keep control of my family, my home, and my son, but I was clearly in denial because you cannot be a proper mother with an addiction like that. It's just not possible. And I had no education on available resources. I had no support system that I could trust. I had no support system that if I decided to trust were educated. Everybody that I knew was judgmental. So I kept my addiction a secret, and I tried to clean up in private, which is not possible. It's not an option of just quit, which many loved ones think it is. You know, I must have heard 1,000 times when I finally came clean, you need to just quit, you need to just stop, do it for your family. I would have done it for anybody, and I couldn't. I couldn't do it for myself, I couldn't do it for my son. I must have tried 100 times to clean up, and things just weren't going good. I was sick all the time, I was using more than I ever had, I was on the verge of losing my job, and I found out I was pregnant. Well, needless to say, I knew I had to quit at that point. I stopped cold turkey. I was sicker than I've ever been, and in the mind state that I was in, I'm like, I am not going to use opiates. But I did clear my mom's cabinet of all her trazodone, her Seroquel, stuff that was probably way worse for you than opiates can even be. And I put myself into a drug coma for a week. I hopped on the computer and tried to educate myself, and that's where I found out that most professionals think, or at least at that time thought, that methadone maintenance is the best treatment for opiate addiction in pregnant women. So I made an appointment with the local Brattleboro Habit OpCo to get methadone treatment, where Dr. Klosser's the doctor. And I called, and my son's father, who I was with at the time and still am with, I made an appointment for him and I. His parents knew he used, they didn't know that I used, so I rode on his coattails for a couple months till they found out. My first day there was my last day using. I haven't used since. Right now I am going on 17 months sober. The daughter I was pregnant with is healthy and fine. Nothing bad happened to her from my opiate use. I actually found out that I overdosed while I was 3 months pregnant. The one time I overdosed, I was pregnant, which scares me more than anything. She had no issues with the methadone after the pregnancy, which people worry about. And she's a perfectly healthy, perfect little girl. And I couldn't be more happy, because when I found out I was pregnant, I'm like, I gotta get rid of this baby. I can't do this, it's too much. And there was no way that I was going to be able to work it out, and nothing was going to save me, but the clinic really did. It really did save me. And I'm going to end this with a little bit of advice, and this is personal, just from my personal experience. I think for loved ones, the most important key is that you cannot give up. I've seen too many families fall apart because they think that you can just do it, and they get mad and they step out. And that's not okay. It's hard for an addict to clean up on their own. It's near impossible. They need the support system. I think one of the biggest things now is to stop the stigma of addiction. It is horrible, it's out of control, but not everybody out there is out to get you. They have problems, they have real issues. They are not choosing to do the things they do. it wasn't Mariah making bad choices, it was Mariah as an addict. And had I had those people there for me as my support system, I would have been a lot cleaner, a lot sooner. I think the best things that we can do as a community is to educate and spread the word. And the more people that know about the resources available, the more people that help spread the word, the more people that maybe won't use, and the more people that will clean up sooner. And that's my story. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Mariah. That was a beautiful story, and it took so much courage to share that. And it's such an important part to put a face on addiction. As we know, it affects everyone at every class level. It isn't a poverty issue. It isn't a at-risk issue. It is a global issue that affects every life. So thank you so much for sharing that courageous story. I'd like to welcome up next Chief of Police for the Bennington Police Department, Paul Dissett. Thank you.
First, I want to start out by saying that I'm really proud of Mariah. I've never met Mariah. What a fantastic job you've done. Obviously not a professional speaker, which is perfect. We would like to hear from people like yourself so that we have a better understanding, especially in law enforcement. The other thing I want to thank you for is being vertically challenged like myself, because the microphone's perfect for me. Thank you. So tonight, when I was asked to speak here, I was honored to be asked to speak, and I promise you I will only take a few minutes. Some of you that know me know that I can go on, and that I promise will not happen. Drug abuse, opiate abuse is not just a problem in Bennington. We know that. It's not just a problem in Bennington County or the state of Vermont. The good doctor here, who I've been educated by and learned a lot from, this is clearly a global issue. The difference is that here in Bennington, we have decided to step up and face our challenges. It's a challenge that's been brought before us. Drug abuse and criminality are daunting everywhere. People in our community have recognized the issues and the critical need to take action. About 3.5 years ago in Bennington County, the law enforcement officials from the state police, the municipal police departments, the sheriff's department, the Bennington County State's Attorney's Office decided that it was time for Bennington to step up and take the appropriate action. We met with local legislators and we came up with a way to combat the problem. I, myself personally, received a lot of support from Town Manager Stuart Hurd and the Select Board to do what needed to be done in Bennington. And we worked with the Drug Task Force. We all saw the big spread in the paper from time and time again when we did County Strike 1, County Strike 2, and we continue to combat the drug problems with the help of the Bennington County State's Attorney's Office with prosecution. Some people thought, well gosh, that's a little bit much. Why isn't it on the front page of the paper? Why are we hammering these people? We're hammering these people because they're dealing drugs, they're dealing poison to people in our community. That's why we hammer these people. We, law enforcement, want the people in the community to know what we're doing. We want to remain transparent. Time and time again, I've been doing this for 25 years. Time and time again I hear, oh, the police aren't doing anything. Oh, I call the police, they don't do anything. I call the police about my neighbor selling drugs, they don't do anything. Well, no, because we have to build a solid case. So we come forward, we come forward with a bunch of ideas, we put our heads together, we share information, we work diligently at solving the problem. We were very transparent and will continue to be transparent with our drug efforts in these communities in Bennington County and surrounding areas, because we also work with the Mass authorities, the New York authorities, and the New Hampshire authorities. Years ago, we didn't always share information in the law enforcement world. We didn't share information with community partners, such as the hospital and United Counseling Service and DCF. We kind of kept everything a secret, which we don't do anymore. We share the information. There's great leadership at the Bennington County State's Attorney's Office under Erica Marthage and her crew. They do a wonderful job at helping law enforcement available all the time. We also have a lot of questions. The laws change all the time. and sometimes, in my opinion, not for the better. And law enforcement is challenged. We have a lot of challenges that we have to face in order to combat the drug issues. Working together with our community partners to identify people that need help, that's the direction that we're going. We understand that kicking in doors and throwing people on the ground and arresting them and putting them through the system is not just one solution. We need to have multiple solutions. Working with the Department of Health and the State's Attorney's Office and Turning Point, we've come up with a new way of dealing with some of the issues. I firmly believe that when we arrest someone with a drug issue, that they should be given some help almost immediately. So now what happens is, and I don't want to get too involved in the program, but what happens now is when somebody's arrested for drug possession, they receive this little green card. It says, "What's my next step?" On the card is the telephone number to Turning Point. And we hand that card out to people so that they understand that we're not there to just arrest them and put them through prosecution, but we're there to try to get them help, because we can't arrest our way out of this problem. We need to find solutions within the community. We need to work with our community partners, and we need to get people the help that they need so that they can recover. They have to recover from their addictions. They have to maintain their sobriety to be productive members of our community. That's what's key here. That's what's most important. It takes an entire community and an entire nation to solve the problems that we're currently seeing. You can't rely just on the police to go and make arrests and think that's going to be the end of it. We're only taking away the drug dealer. We're not taking away the drug issues that people like Mariah were having. Drugs are readily available. If it's not this person, it's the next person that's going to sell them. So if we can help people recover and kick their addiction and keep them on the right track, hopefully we'll come up with some type of solution. I can tell you that the police all over work diligently at solving and removing drugs and criminality. It's time that we all get together, put our heads together as a community, and come up with solid solutions to work together to curb the opiate and addiction problems that we have here. Please stick around and work with our groups, and let's come up with some ideas. Thank you.
My name is Marianne Morris. I'm the Executive Director of the Collaborative. Tonight's event is called Solutions for a Better Tomorrow, and that's the part of the evening that we're on to next, is finding out some solutions. So we're going to ask you guys to become a little bit more involved and give us your ideas, and we'll all get a chance to get up and move around a little bit, which I always think is great. I'll tell you how we got here, which was when the governor did his State of the Union address in January about opiates. He also called a meeting in June for all the different districts in Vermont. A lot of us here in this room went to that meeting, and the governor's directive from that meeting in June, when we were all up in Montpelier, was that we should all go back to our communities and have a community forum. And so we thought about it, and we developed a planning committee. A lot of the people from the planning committee are here today, including law enforcement, including Turning Point, the hospital, UCS, your local coalitions, Creative Workforce Solutions, local pharmacists, who have I forgotten, the State's Attorney's Office, Vermont Department of Health. We all got together and planned because we wanted to make sure that we just didn't have something that was a one-hit wonder, that we do something quick and then forget about it and all go home. We wanted to make sure there was something that would last. And we also wanted to make sure that it wasn't an opportunity for people to come and complain, but an opportunity for people to come together and work towards a solution. So we had several different planning meetings around it. We decided to tackle this thing in 4 different sectors. One would be prevention, which thankfully Dr. Kloster talked a little bit about prevention. He talked about treatment. That's another one of our sectors that we're working on. Recovery. He talked about, and thankfully Chief Doucette talked about law enforcement and public safety, which is our 4th sector. So those are our 4 sectors: prevention, treatment, recovery, law enforcement, public safety. What I'm going to ask everybody to do is to think in their heads and in their hearts about which one of those 4 sectors means the most to you. Which one do you have the greatest attachment to? Which one do you want to give your input towards? And we're going to break into those 4 groups in a little bit. I'll tell you about the process that we'll go through so that you have an understanding of it before you get into your small groups. It's called the turn the curve process. So you'll see, the planning committee, all these smart people who went to Montpelier and who met for all this time, got together and we created a list of what in Bennington County do we have as assets. And it was a great activity. We have a big long list. And then we created another list, which was, what do we see as the needs for Bennington County? Another great list. Then we honed that down to what were our greatest needs for our community, what was missing or what needed strengthening. And out of those results, we cultivated these 4 topics that the 4 sectors are going to talk about tonight. You're going to hear what that result is, what sort of end game that you want to build solutions for. You're going to come to an understanding that, okay, we're doing some things in Bennington County around that, but we want to do better. So we want to turn the curve so that we're doing better in Bennington County around that result. You're going to hear a little bit of the story behind that. Why in Bennington County does this result look like this? And then you're going to hear about what partners are needed in order to get to that result. And then you guys are going to give us the best solutions that you can think of to work towards. And these solutions are going to be under a couple of different categories. First, we want the cheap solutions, the ones that aren't going to cost a dime, because nobody gave us money to be here. Maybe they will one day, but we're all here because this is a passion for all of us and we want to make things work in Bennington County. So you're going to find the cheap solutions, the things that can be done without a dime. You're going to want to find the sticky solutions, the ones that are going to be able to be implemented and be able to still be around as time goes on. So a community dinner to celebrate family time is great, because that's definitely something that we need to encourage family time to work towards prevention. But that's a one-hit kind of a thing. We want to think about things that'll last a little bit longer. A policy, a systematic change, a committee that works on community dinners throughout the year in different neighborhoods, that's a little bit better. That's a little bit more of a sticky one. And then you want to have a couple of the ones that seem really out there, really the shoot for the moon ones. Like I want a rail train that goes from Dorset to Bennington so people in the North Shire can access the services that are down here in the town. So those are kind of the 4 ways that you're going to look at your solutions. And then we're all going to come back together again and just give a little bit of a synopsis about what all the 4 topics talked about and what our best solutions were. That's the great part, because as we've been meeting in the planning committee, what I've noticed and what Chief Doucette talked about was these simple solutions that came out just by people from the different sectors being in the same room. So law enforcement working with treatment and recovery to make things a little bit stronger. And that's what I hope to hear tonight too. And as we report out, people maybe can hear connections and things like that. So it's time to break into our groups. But first I kind of want to get a sense for where people are headed. So if you think that your heart is bringing you towards law enforcement or public safety, raise your hand. Fabulous. If you think that your heart is bringing you towards recovery, raise your hand. Better yet. Treatment. Okay. And prevention. Okay. I'm going to ask the people who are working in recovery to be the first ones to move because we have a special room for you. And you can follow Katie over to that room. You don't need to bring a chair, I don't think, and Katie, you know where to get more chairs if you need them. And you guys can exit, and then I'll shush around everybody else. Okay. If you need extra chairs, come on over. I'll tell everybody where the other sectors are meeting, and then I'll ask everybody to kind of move at the same time. And you'll want to move your chairs to be in a semicircle around that area. So I'll tell you where you're going first, and then I'll say, okay, everybody go, so that we only have one big moment of chaos, hopefully. In the back corner there is prevention. And if the facilitators can go and stand by their things now, that would be great. In the corner, wait, nobody else move but facilitators. In the corner over here, we have treatment. And in the corner...
I'm Stuart Hurd, Bennington's town manager. Jim Carroll, selectman. Jeff Flint, Bennington County Sheriff.
Bruce Smith, school-based position at Union High School.
Eric Marthich, Bennington County State Street.
Lieutenant Lloyd Dean, Bennington Police.
Anthony Williams, one consultant, also
Michael Ann Sylvester, Economic Services.
Eric Green, I come to Bennington, New York.
Okay, great. Well, thanks all for joining our group. So just to kind of go over again what we're going to do, we're going to look at our chart here. We're going to talk a little bit about a specific result, and our task is to come up with our best, 3 or 4 best ideas. And that's what we're going to bring back to the group. Okay, so Ref is going to scribe our ideas. We're going to want to put down our additions in some of the areas and keep place for other ideas that come up that we might want to come back to in future forums or other formats, okay? So first we're going to do the result. The result that this group has been tasked with, again, these were developed at a prior community meeting and kind of distilled down for us. Improved community outreach and engagement for at-risk areas. So improved community outreach and engagement for at-risk areas. Does that make sense? Does anybody want to talk about what that might mean to them? Yeah.
Well, I'll jump in now. Later in the evening, Michael Harrington, who is our Economic and Community Development Director, will be presenting a program that we call Catalyst. And it is specifically designed to reach out to the community, to our neighbors, not only through law enforcement, but through building code enforcement, identify at-risk neighborhoods, and try to engage the owners of the properties and the people who live there in different behavioral attitudes. So
Okay.
that's what it means to me.
Great. So can you write down like things for like just write things to learn more about maybe and
Okay,
catalyst. Anybody else want to talk about what this means to them, or if they don't understand what this means to them? Improve community outreach and engagement for all risk areas.
We're going to target specific areas.
What?
We're going to target specific areas of Bennington where there's specific
Under this
prevalent
program, you mean? Well, it could be geographic areas, it could be population segments. So it might be children under age 6, it might be, so we have the flexibility within this group to cover all of that. So some of the ideas might be that we come up with that we should focus in on a certain population. Some of the ideas might be that we need to focus in on certain economic strata, that we need to focus on certain geographic locations. Does that make sense? So it's broad, deliberately broad here. So the idea is that, yeah.
Yeah, I think one of the areas would be the juvenile justice team has been working with at-risk children, which would be kids living in homes with substance abuse. So I think that's one.
Okay.
Or I'm not sure how in-depth Catalyst is, because it's, I haven't heard anything about it, but the sharing of information between law enforcement, Department of Corrections, Department of Children and Families, so that we can identify what kids are living in homes, not only maybe in other counties they define it as a parent that's involved with the Department of Corrections, and then children and substance abuse and children in homes. That could be anywhere, not
Okay, so we may want to go with, like, just kind of listing some of what at-risk means. It might be a geographic area, children. What's the age limit there?
Well, for us, I think Beth actually chairs that group too. I think it's any kids up to 18.
Yeah.
It's any youth that DCF would work
We
with
really
that would consider.
broaden the scope of that conversation and discussion to any child.
Okay. So the idea here is that we're clearly doing some things in our community. We're going to hear more about what some people are doing. And what we're doing is not enough, that we want to be doing more, right? So we want to do more outreach. We want to engage more folks who are at risk. So the story behind the baseline here, again, this is kind of why does this curve look like this? Why are we here and not here already? Okay, so why is there a gap between where we want to be and where we are? And the story here is that some sections of Bennington County experience higher incidents of crime, are more impacted by crime. What else contributes to this gap about where we are and where we want to be?
Part of what contributes to that is people's willingness to step forward and report what they're seeing. And that's something that definitely needs to be addressed, and we need to have people feel more comfortable and confident about contacting law enforcement and reporting things that they're seeing so that law enforcement is aware, whether that's through anonymous tip line or...
Hold on to your ideas for how. Just for right now, stick with what the problem is, which is people don't feel comfortable coming forward.
I'm not sure where this fits in, but it's something that I've given a great deal of thought to, and this is mostly directed at the chief and the state's attorney, and that is diversion. Let's say you get somebody who's caught possessing heroin or something else. Are you statutorily required to charge them? Or is there another alternative that we can seek, and that is, if instead of going to jail for possession, they agree to go into treatment, and they're tested over a period of time. As long as they stay clean over, let's say, a 3-year period, they don't go to jail. But if they don't stay clean, they go to jail.
So I think we can get to where some of those programs might be developing, but your point is really there are certain laws and statutory obligations and processes and protocol in place in both the state's attorney's office that affect public safety.
More diversion instead of criminally offering as more of the diversion aspect of it.
Right, so we'll get back to that solution.
My question essentially is, is there anything from the state's attorney's office or the police department where you're developing ideas or planting seeds in the minds of our legislators to perhaps address it in this way?
And I think, not to cut you off, Jim, because that's not my point, that's what this is about. Like, let's brainstorm and come up with ideas that we can present. So I think that what you're saying is, what Beth wrote is greater clarity to the general public on laws and charging, and that's something that now we'll come up with another idea, and then we can come back to that.
Yeah.
So I'm not trying not to answer your question. I just want to
I mean, the
state
answer is yes, there's a new law, and we're going to be working on it, but...
I think if addicts or those who are prone to use or abuse, instead of this terrible fear of being arrested and imprisoned, say, wait a second, maybe there's a second chance or a first chance. That's a question.
Yeah. Thank you.
I want to address some of the fear. Paul, I'm so proud of the work that we've done here in Bennington. We've gone beyond fear, and we've tried to deal with the problem. The kickback is, the more you call attention to all of the drug raids in Bennington, there are people elsewhere in the county, elsewhere in the state, who say, well, that Bennington is a terrible place to live. It's not. It's not any worse than other communities that aren't doing anything.
Right.
So the problem is, how do we address that there are communities that are fearful. There are people who are fearful for the same reason. They don't want to report to you because they don't want it to seem like the problem is bigger here than somewhere else. So I do commend the transparency that you've shown. And it's a risk because you hear these comments. It's like some people are so negative they can hear a positive thing and twist it around so that it sounds so bad, and that you lose all of the benefits. I don't want to lose that.
Right. If I could follow up on what Warren's talking about, I think one of the problems in Bennington and elsewhere is that the community as a whole is not engaged. It's not their problem because it happens to other people. It always happens to others. I think we need to engage the community wholeheartedly.
Which is our exact result here, improve community outreach and engagement. So I think that speaks right to it. So if we're gonna do this work, who are the partners that we need to engage? Law enforcement, we have some community groups, individuals and businesses. I would add to that list human service agencies. Who else?
Legislators.
Legislators. This is another more partners. Great, thank you. I'm sorry. Sometimes I think it would be easier if I just wrote it myself.
Early intervention in school.
I don't want Okay, so we've got.
I mean, kids are only in school for a short period of time, so they're back home. So, unless the parents are involved as well, you're not really going to get them to break their social norm with their environments. You're only going to have that brief time in school, telling them everything that's going wrong in their household in your eyes. We're not addressing the facts of what's going on within the household.
So parents.
So the parents have to have a buy-in that the law enforcement is going to kind of assist them with treatment versus criminal prosecution at all times. I mean, I think it's a necessary act.
Okay, in the next 2 minutes, your group should start working on solutions if you're not already.
But I think the more parents that know that the police are involved and they're going to lead down a path for treatment versus correctional prosecution, and therefore really mess up their life and getting employed and gainful employment. Because I see them on the other end after they're charged. And I got to go out there and sell these people to the community, which ain't easy.
So I think treatment providers, definitely, especially for youth, right? Is that what you're?
Parent buy-in and a prevention track versus a criminal prosecution track. I think that's what we're going to get parent buy-in.
You know, there was a day in time when Bennington County had the largest and most successful DARE program in the state. And I think that's lacking where law enforcement doesn't get involved in the prevention aspect. You know, we talk about trying to delay these children from their first years. And you can say what you want about all the statistics behind the DARE program, but we no longer have law enforcement actively engaged in K-5 areas.
So I think maybe what we want to do is we want to hold that for a section when we talk about solutions. But somebody...
To add on to that point, the DARE program also establishes in a child's mind that there's a healthy relationship to be had with law enforcement. That they're growing up in an environment where, you know, criminality is existing, they're probably being told that they're the bad guys. So I think the DARE program also has benefits in that regard as well. Developing, excuse me, a healthy relationship with law enforcement. Even if it's just one officer that they know they can go to. Just one officer that they know.
One more partner?
As far as partners, the faith community. And then talk the faith community into not judging that you're
Thank you. Okay, I think those are good additions. So now we're going to move into the solutions section. So why don't we go ahead and list them, and then...
I'm going to throw in one thing for partners, even for Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts. I mean, that's something that I think parents don't utilize that much these days either, but if there was a portion of that program that involved kind of drug prevention or just community awareness.
And I also talked about the legislative or federal hearings, boys and girls college, we don't really have.
So I'm gonna just make a note toward as we move towards solutions. Those are kind of mentoring programs, generally speaking. Those kind of so I wonder if we could put something like enhanced mentor programs. And then I don't want to lose your thread about not just DARE specifically, but programs that would
Establish a relationship.
Thank you.
Law enforcement.
Okay.
Another program that I think was effective when I was principal was the school resource officer, as far as getting that connection with kids at the middle school, which I thought was essential. Expanding on that.
But also the other way, because in school, I know kids are really trying to come, but you learn a lot of information about like what houses kids go to party at, that kind of thing. So I think this is information.
It was a great partnership.
And, cutting down on that access.
Okay. So you're talking about maybe outreach specifically to parents, which is something else you were talking about, Anthony, right? So outreach to parents. What other ideas? Solution? There's no wrong answer. We're making a list.
The prescription drug drops program that we have really fostered here in the Bennington County area has worked out well and is growing leaps and bounds.
Okay, so the drug drops.
Drug drop, prescription drug drop. We have got buy-in from the high school students that make the boxes for us, so they realize the value of this. They have made 2, they're making the 3rd one right now that are being distributed in law enforcement agencies here in Bennington County. So that is one solution that is on the upswing for popularity.
I also I want to go back to the idea that we have supportive laws that support treatment and diversion, enhanced diversion.
Yeah, I just wanted to address that. We already have that. That was the legislation that was passed and funded this year.
Yeah.
The risk reduction program. The issue with it, or rapid intervention, the issue with it is it's not, the specifics are not laid out. So every county has to tackle, what does this look like in our county?
So does that mean that you're left to interpret it?
Well, every county is supposed to be looking at that. We already do that. We social work almost every drug case. And it's extremely time intensive, and it's frankly, I'm not a social worker, so, they are in the process, the Department of Agency of Human Services is in the process of they've posted those positions for a statewide coordinator, and then each county will get an individual that's going to take every case, do a risk assessment of it, determine what needs that person has. My county's always been signed on to that. Diversion's not equipped to deal with drug issues.
Right.
They're equipped to deal with pot and drinking, and
Right.
that's it.
The other thing that's going to be part of that, so that will be, I just want to briefly talk on this and then we'll move to another solution. But there's, that should increase the access point is the hope to treatment. And even though each county, it's up to the county and it's housed with the state's attorney's office, Erica's been working with a lot of partners who are here at this forum to talk about what should it look like in our county, what resources do we have here?
Are you saying that a need then is more funding for those positions?
No, we're very lucky with, Dick Sears is very aggressive on getting the funding. It's I've had meetings with almost everybody here from agency heads about who should be looking at the cases and it's the mechanics of it. And, it's another whole job to have someone.
Well, I guess that's why I was thinking funding to provide specialists
That's right.
who would come and work with each county.
And we got the funding now, that's what this year.
But does the rest of the state?
Every county, is funded now for, it's just actually filling those positions.
So looking back again at our partner list and thinking about what other solutions could we come up with? What other ideas do you have? What could we do one time to increase outreach?
There's a program in Hawaii called HOPE. It's a sort of a diversion program as well. I think it just got awarded or nominated for Outstanding Criminal Justice System in 2014. Basically, this diversion program, once you complete it, some of your charges, if they're not harmful to people, get expunged from your record. So that's kind of a carrot for them to stay clean for long periods of time and not reoffend. And make it easier on probation officers to do their job, because the studies show that a higher percentage of these people don't break the rules. So it's easier to manage outside of facility. I think it's a great program. Everybody should look it up. It's Hope Hawaii. Just check it out on Google. It's a pretty amazing program. It's immediate justice.
So I just was going to ask, part of the issue is that as far as people to help, like you said, to assist folks when they're coming out on supervision or they're trying to get their license. So does this program bridge that gap where it has folks that can literally help with fewer cases, I guess?
It's a pretty new program. I don't really know a whole lot about it, but when I did look it up, I was pretty impressed. So I think it's going to be different state to state, county to county, what's going to work here and what works there. It may not work here, so that may not work. All I'm saying is that we have a population that's going to get older, that's going to look for work, that's going to have criminal records, and just because they're clean for 20 years doesn't mean they're going to be able to work in certain spots. They're going to be below poverty levels, working off the utilizing state funds and being under work.
So that's something I'm going to put over here, actually, also as the HOPE program, as something to learn more about. But what other ideas do people have for solutions?
Okay, it's just about the 5-minute warning, so you should start trying to think about your top 3 or 4 solutions.
So one of the things that we did that addressed one of that, and it came out of the juvenile justice team, was the positive ticketing campaign. And I think that was done on a very small scale, but my recollection was that that really did have a huge impact for those youth in our community. It changed the perception for many of them of law enforcement and what they were about.
No, Jim, they were kids throughout the community. The positive ticket campaign was successful in the sense that when we saw kids riding their bicycles with helmets, if we stopped a car for a traffic violation, the kids were in a seatbelt. Mom or dad might get a speeding ticket, but the kids would get a ticket so that they could get ice cream or whatever. And the kids would come up to us and say, "Do you have any tickets?" And they want to do something good, So I mean, that's something positive in the community to improve the image of law enforcement. And it works.
I see a couple of these ideas really focus on relationship between community and law enforcement. And one more thing and then we got to start narrowing it down.
With engagement, I think it's among the treatment and the parole. I'm learning this as I get into the SPOKE program. We had, as an example, we had a meeting of the treatment providers and parole so that we could talk to each other. If we saw something happening, that we would start to collaborate, and also to include the pharmacies. Everybody has a piece of the puzzle for this individual, and if we collaborate together, I think we can have a more open relationship.
So you're talking maybe about treatment teams, kind of?
Stretch that term.
Information sharing.
It's information sharing. The pharmacy will call us. They saw somebody buying needles. They're on Suboxone. We talked to the parole, and kind of like coming together.
You mean the police officers on duty?
We were talking with the parole, treatment providers, and pharmacies. It was very powerful.
And that's similar, and I don't know what, I haven't heard Catalyst yet, but it's very similar to what they're doing in Rutland, with just the sharing.
Yes.
Like if they're doing it in Rutland or not,
Yeah.
what is important is the sharing of information.
Exactly.
And kind of the follow-through of, we're really just sitting, I'm not looking for people, he's not looking for people to arrest, I'm not looking for people to put in jail, I'm goaling, if nobody does drugs, I don't do that, it's just how do we get there? How do we have this population, and then how do we share that information in a way? Beth and I talk about this all the time. How do we share information about? I don't want to know everything she knows, but I want to know about the at-risk kids that she knows that I know who's been in the house 5 times.
Right. So I think that is one, I would argue that perhaps that's one of our pie in the sky. Because that takes a lot of coordination. We have to figure out releases, we have to figure out.
It doesn't cost anything.
Right, I know. So I would say it's also a low-cost idea. There are a couple on here, I think, that are pretty low or no cost. So what do you guys think the best of our 3 or 4 of these ideas are?
Okay, just about 2 more minutes.
I think expand the mentoring programs. That's right now.
Okay.
That would be voice for
Expand the mentoring type programs / SROs and school outreach. Same thing. It's the same thing. That takes one line. Go.
No, mentoring program is one.
And earlier,
Sorry, I'm not buying that. There's no mentoring and single room occupancy connection.
earlier than middle school intervention.
Okay, so that's not up here. Do you have a specific?
One of the mentoring things, I think, or education / education.
Okay.
That would fall under DARE. We brought the DARE program back. I took it in 5th grade, which is pre-middle school.
So a prevention program in schools, is that
Elementary schools,
what?
so younger.
In elementary schools.
I love the officers in the school, especially with the little kids.
Okay.
Starting with the little kids is huge.
So maybe a police early prevention program in schools. Police delivered or police involved prevention program. Does that make sense?
Law enforcement prevention program.
Law enforcement prevention program for schools. Thank you. Elementary schools. Okay, what about, we got 2 more slots. What do you guys think? I've heard a lot about relationship with law enforcement. We've got the prevention program.
There's a lot of talk about diversion.
I think a lot of parents are scared to turn their kids in, and beat it down prevention. It's hidden, it's something behind closed doors, and this builds up. Is there some kind of way where law enforcement can work with parents and lead towards?
We talk about this at JJ a lot, that they have so much to offer that doesn't involve removing kids from the home, but people are afraid.
Yeah. So something about parent education programs, which outreach to parents.
Around the benefits of utilizing law enforcement?
Well, maybe if we keep it more broad, though, it can encompass lots of those things.
Yeah, targeted parent prevention.
Outreach to parents could also mean, family time and learning how to be an effective parent. The other issue is that parents wait far too long to call the police and get advice. And a lot of people look to the police, and I'll say it, my boss is here, I'll say it. People look at the police now as social workers, and we are not that. We're here to uphold the law and enforce the law, but we do try to help out and put parents in the right direction. We don't always have the answers that parents are looking for, but we do try to put parents in the right direction. I can't parent everyone's children in Bennington.
How about Brattleboro?
That's part of the issue is that, parents don't take care of the problems at home themselves. They want someone else to do it.
We have a whole list of referrals. Turning Point, and all sorts of other organizations that we refer people to all the time.
So we've got one more, and we want to make sure that one of these is our low or no cost idea. So I'm not sure that what we have up here now, mentoring programs, law enforcement prevention program in elementary schools, and outreach to parents. I'm not sure.
All of those seem child wellness.
Okay.
Post-arrest diversion. Post-arrest diversion. greater emphasis on health. You know, Eric pointed out.
I think the thing that works is the expanding the drug drive.
Say that again.
Expanding the drug drive.
You know, I've read some stuff about this. It's a great program. I think, you know, over 5 years they got so many billion pounds of drugs, you know, that off the street. Great. But my question is, why are we documenting Dr. James that prescribing these? Just having a conversation. Hey, you're 90% of the problem out here. What's going on?
Yeah, but that's been addressed, and I'll tell you, through the medical center, and now that she's here, through the medical center, I have to tell you, the doctors are on board. You know, most of the doctors are on board. You go and you have some type of surgery now, the doctor will tell you, Aleve and ibuprofen. Mix those two together, you'll feel great, and they're not prescribing as many narcotics as they used to.
Okay, I'm giving you guys one more minute, and then we'll all gather back.
I'm gonna bring you back to one of your ideas about information sharing. Somebody mentioned that was low or no cost. I wonder if we could make that into an idea that would work. Like, what would that mean? What would that mean? Besides information sharing.
Here's my take on it. If someone comes through your system, have them sign an agreement where they share information about doctors. You do that already.
Do the police officers do that?
That agreement is worked out with the state's attorney's office.
I do all of them.
So,
you know, it's the
so what do we need to do that we're not doing to make
Well,
that happen?
what we've talked about is like juvenile justice, the coalition, we're all addressing kind of the same problems, but in 10 meetings. You know, she and I probably go to 10 different meetings a month, and we're all talking about the same thing.
I go to. Yeah. So what do we do about that?
For information sharing, this meeting has been an eye-opening for me. And I'm familiar with a lot of the systems. So an annual meeting that reported out progress, that looked at things we're doing, things we're trying, and that would also deal with that issue I brought up about, we're going public with this, we're going to be honest, we're going to put it on the table, here it is. And I think people will buy into something like that. You can do it in schools too. We should have the safety fair, where organizations come in, kids got to know the different organizations in town they'd never heard of before. And they loved it.
And I worry too that, as Stu mentioned, the Catalyst program, there may be things that many of us know little about or don't know anything about that would be our low or no cost option if we knew about it.
So central sharing time or place.
It's almost like this Catalyst program is it's going to probably roll out and probably a great program. But I don't know how many people in the community are even part of that.
So Beth is going to put that all together in our last one.
I'm going to ask you guys to come back into the groups.
Who's reporting out for our group?
And sit.
All you have to do is read
sit
what
as we were.
You got a question?
Shared. So who's going to, no, you can't leave till we have a reporter to the big group. I'm not joking.
That's right.
It's not allowed to be me.
And there was a lot of good work about that, but what I heard was that there's still a lot of questions out there about a myriad of other topics, all associated with substance use, opioid use in Bennington County. And I want to say that first, everything that was scribed on your brainstorm will get compiled and sent out in the email. So if you gave us an email address, that is great, and you will get some more information down the road. If you stick around after our report outs, there's all these professionals in the building. Center for Restorative Justice, law enforcement, the hospital. If you guys can keep it quiet, that would be great, because we're going to have all of you individually report out. So all these professionals are going to stick around too, so you can grab somebody's ear and ask them a question if you did not get yours answered during your sector work tonight. So now I hope that you guys will all be nice and polite and quiet for the first report out. Was there a group that would like to volunteer to go first? We're going to hear about the quadrant work that was done. Okay, we have preventions volunteering to go first. You can either use this microphone or that one over there. It's up to you. Who's the reporter? Yay.
right, so we did prevention, the goal being to increase knowledge about prevention. All right, I'll talk louder. All right, our goal is to increase knowledge and awareness of prevention in Bennington. Just going to turn this a little bit so that I can read that also. Things that we came up with, solutions, are the youth doing outreach. We have a lot of youth programs that are really busy in the Bennington community, so that was the one that had the most, I think, hand raised. Alternative pain management, looking at other ways to treat pain, whether it be yoga, biofeedback, meditation, etc. Early childhood education, parenting, linking the community, looking at making parents aware. You really need to store your medication, put it up someplace. Don't just assume your kids are not going to get into it. And the last one is pretty comprehensive, but it's about education and really making sure that people are educated, from the doctors to members of the community to kids to teachers, really all around looking at how to educate people and help them understand the risks of opiates and having them around. So that's us.
Just a quick follow-up question. Did you guys think of any out-of-the-box partners or anything in that work?
One of ours was transportation and making that, like if a kid comes to an event, then they get a token for the bus so they can come to another event, and making it kind of an incentive to continue coming to more and more events instead of just showing up to one and then not having to ride to the next one, or not really being interested in going to the next one because it's too far away. So.
Teens for Change.
Teens for Change, yes, I heard about that too. That was a great opportunity. So these are important reasons why we have the email list, so hopefully we can circle back around and make sure that some of these connections are made. And that transportation issue is a great one because it's one of those sticky ones that we talked about. If the teens have the coin to be able to get back, then they're going to continue to come back. Thanks very much. Let's go around the circle then and pick on treatment next. Who's the reporter for treatment? Awesome.
So how many doctors does it take to hold a poster up, right? Increasing the knowledge of and access to counseling or treatment options in Bennington was the result or problem for our group. One of the stories behind this is there really is a lack of resources. There's a certain amount of training that's needed. I know personally it's difficult to find enough licensed alcohol and drug counselors to hire from any employer in the area. So we thought too that about partners, which would include the faith communities, the various social services folks, employers, schools, colleges, and the VA. And so we had to choose the best ideas of a whole bunch of them. One thing was some people had struggled with is when it came time they needed some help, they didn't know where to go. They couldn't find even that entry point that said, okay, tell me what's going on, sort of like a clearinghouse, to sort of set them off in the right direction. So that was something that felt there was a very strong need for that. So either to create some kind of a resource pamphlet, start here, go there, sort of one-point entry, maybe an online information resources. So many people use the internet, the right search terms, Bennington addiction, and get some kind of guidance on where to go. Yet, of course, in a rural area like this, and with the income, the poverty that many of our people struggle with, rides is a big issue. How do you get from Pownell, from Woodford, or wherever, to get some kind of treatment here? And besides Medicaid, neighbors, volunteers, are possible ideas there. And something actually that Trey and I have been involved with, UCS as well, so it's like private and public enterprise here, is working on a larger sort of resource treatment center for Bennington area. There's for people who are insured, people who are uninsured or underinsured, and somewhere that would offer a fuller range of treatment. because one of the things we talked about is that there's a spectrum of intensity, resource intensity or treatment intensity, given where you might be in the spectrum of the illness of addiction. And then there's a Vermont Recovery Project training. I know that the Vermont Recovery Network and Turning Point does this as well. This is probably through alcohol and drug abuse programs with the state. There's room for volunteers to gain knowledge and to reach out and guide other people through the recovery process. All these treatments we talk about occupy a limited amount of time in anybody's day in the recovery. And if you go to treatment for 1 hour, 1 day a week, or 3 days a week, there's still 23 hours left in each of those days, and what you do to fill that time to develop a community that really is about you getting well and having your recovery. So that's the report from our group.
Thanks. Who's going to report out for a law? All right, great.
I am.
Yeah, I have Vanna with me tonight, so we were the...
Just trying to make it hard on you.
Well, our goal was, the result we were shooting for was to improve community outreach engagement for at-risk areas. It's interesting, it was one of the things we noticed. We had some very diverse agencies doing a lot of things that other agencies weren't aware of. So one of our goals, one of our solutions actually, if I could jump ahead to that, was to build some kind of an annual, biannual meeting, community meeting, or maybe a newsletter or some way of communicating interagency programs that are going down, just to get that communication going. Also, we talked about mentoring programs. Some of those exist. They greatly need to be expanded. We talked about everything from Boy Scouts and Girl Scouts to DARE to I like Big Brother, Big Sister. In some areas is a very effective program. Those types of things we thought would be helpful. Also, a law enforcement prevention program. And it needs to begin in the elementary schools. In the middle school, we had a resource officer who I thought did an awesome job of connecting with young people, and I'd like to see that, and most of the group wants to see that at even an earlier grade level. Outreach to parents, education, parenting, all of those are things that need formalization. We didn't have a specific strategy or a specific group to say there, but we needed to say that it certainly needs to happen. So the information sharing, the outreach to parents, law enforcement, prevention, mentoring, and one more. The town manager was talking about a new program called Catalyst that we talked about at the beginning, and we spent a lot of time also talking about diversion, so that there was less fear for parents to get help earlier, even if it meant going to officials, law enforcement officials, letting them know that there's a two-edged approach to this. There's going to be prevention, there's going to be punishment, I guess you could say, at the outside. But before you get there, there's a lot in between. There's treatment opportunities, there's places to go, and we want to avoid getting down that road by putting those things up early on. Thank you.
Thank you.
And recovery, lastly. We put you in the last room over there, and you can report out last. Either way.
That's great printing, I can read that. Okay. Okay, hi everyone. We had a really involved group, and it was wonderful because recovery is something that a lot of people don't know anything about. And the conversation that took place in our room, it went in many, many directions, and I was really happy to be part of it. So what we did was we were, this way, thank you. We were looking at reduced stigma around people in recovery and those affected by use. The first thing that we came up with was personal testimony, like we had here earlier, and honestly, bravo to you. What it does is it puts a voice and a face to recovery. And that's the piece that seems to be really missing, but it's changing, and there's a movement that is just, I'm so happy to be a part of it. The second thing was media coverage of services like Turning Point, Of course, I'm all for that, right? For those of you that don't know, I'm Joan Walsh, and I'm the director of Turning Point. And that's really very true. We had a recovery walk a week or so ago, and it was the first one ever in Bennington County. And I was so proud of everybody and so proud to be part of it, because we had 61 people that walked, or that were waiting, part of them were waiting for us when we got there. That's a positive showing of recovery. And one real quick thing, there are 23.5 million people in long-term recovery. You know, how many of you knew that? You know, really. I didn't even know that number, but anyway. The next was collaboration among the entire community, and that's what this is about. The agencies are really, really starting to work together. I've been director for 2 years, and I've seen a big change just in those 2 years, and it's going to continue to grow. This piece right here, to me, is key, because the community really is where it's going to happen. So, bravo to you for being here. Thank you. And the last was alternate transportation, and I have heard that mentioned a couple times up here, so obviously it's something that's truly needed. We are Turning Point Center of Bennington County, not just Bennington, but it's very hard for people in the northern part to get down to us. So that really is key. And I thank you all for being here tonight, for listening. Thank you.
So, thanks. That was a great report out from everybody, and clearly we didn't get to address everything, but like I said, maybe we'll continue these, maybe we'll continue the conversation online, maybe you can continue the conversation after this, but we have a few more things to get through. I forgot to mention at the beginning that through the course of your discussions, you might have had some things revealed to you that might feel confidential, and I advise you to keep them confidential. If somebody revealed their story to you, or if you revealed your story, I'd like everybody to kind of try to keep it in this room and not go outside of this room and say, hey, you know that lady over there? She does this, or this is what happened to her. So this is kind of our working story, so I'd like to ask that of you, and I wish that I had done that before. I wanted to talk about, collaboration came up a lot in the discussions that we just heard about. We know what works, and collaboration is one of the things that works. I've seen it happen in our pre-planning meetings, which is how the green cards that Paul showed earlier came about. We had law enforcement, the state's attorney, recovery and treatment standing together, and this is what they talked about, and the green card is what came of it. So we know that that can work when the different sectors, when different people collaborate, when you just have them start to talk and to listen to each other. I also heard that Bennington County is not unique in our opiate problem. We were compared to different countries, different states, different cities. That's true, but what we can be is unique in how we figure out our solutions for it, and that's why we're here tonight and why we've worked in these small groups. When we want to work towards solutions and not fixate on the problems either, that's always my big deal. And so far, we heard a lot of great solutions, but what we also have drummed up, and now I'm going to ask for my helpers to help me out for a little bit now. You know what I'm saying to you guys? Okay. There's some great connections that were generated. There were some great ideas, but we came with some canned ideas. We thought, wouldn't it be great if we could let each of you walk away with some really great canned ideas that would be easy for you to do, inexpensive or no cost, and so that everybody can walk out tonight and feel like they can work towards the solution of opiates and the risks for opiate use in Bennington County. So what we have here are solutions for a better tomorrow. And these are 5 simple things. It'll fit in your wallet. I'm passing it out now because it's like the peer pressure of being at church and they pass around the coin jar. You have to take it and put it in your wallet. And and they're really easy to remember, and I put them in rainbow colors, and all of our planning committee has worked on these, and they are report when you see something suspicious, call law enforcement, collect your expired and unwanted prescription drugs and turn them into a collection site, volunteer on one of the projects that you helped brainstorm tonight. There was a lot of them out there and a lot of good active people in this crowd who can help get them done. Talk about what you learned tonight at the community forum with family and friends. That's how we spread the word and get more energy going and sort of leverage the energy that we have tonight. And support those struggling to reach wellness for themselves and their family. And we heard a lot about what that support can mean for somebody who's trying to strive for wellness in their recovery. So I want you to take those home. And then next, after that collect your expired and unwanted prescription drugs, I want to introduce our next speaker, which is Chad Schmidt. Sheriff Schmidt has been the instigator of the Bennington County Prescription Task Force for collection of prescription drugs, which is the first one, I believe, in the state of Vermont to say, mail your prescription drugs back to me, I'll take them. The first one to say, I will send my guys to go and collect them. And helped to start the task force that's helped to plan this meeting and has done a lot of work on collection here. And also works at the state level around prescription drug use and collection. So, Chad, thanks.
Paul, you been here again? Well, thank you. I have to confess that I'm really not a subject matter expert on any of the things that we've really talked about here tonight. But I think, like the rest of you, we're all uniquely qualified to be here tonight because for many number of reasons. Number one, many of you may be a parent. You're probably a mother, a father, a brother. You have family in this community. You work with a population of people who may be addicted to something. You may have been an addict yourself. So I think we kind of operate from that common level of, that common ground where we all kind of share a little bit with each other in that aspect. So, I guess that kind of qualifies me to be here tonight. Working together is really, I think, our key and our theme. Bennington County is very unique throughout the state for a number of reasons. I like to call it in law enforcement that we play well in a sandbox together. And what I mean by that is, in other jurisdictions throughout the state, you may not have that communication level with other agencies and other law enforcement groups, and we're pretty lucky here. I know it's kind of unnerving that I have to put up with Chief Doucette, but I do so willingly, and we get along good together despite his shortcomings. And just kidding. Wow! I had to do it. And I got you smiling, which is good. But I think from all of this, and I don't mean to pick on you, Paul, I know I'll pay for that later, but I like to look at hopeful outcomes. And I think at the end of this, wherever the end may be and however the end is defined, that we're going to have a much closer community. I hope that folks will be more accepting of law enforcement experts. Many of you may not know what we do on a day-to-day basis. You see the shock and awe stuff when the media reports on us kicking in doors. But what you don't see are all those other things that we do for the community. The prevention pieces, the take-back events, all of the things that we do to try to avoid doing the kicking in the door stuff. So building trust within the law enforcement community, I think is a real goal and an achievable outcome. Getting us a seat at the table early. Why aren't we in prevention programs in schools anymore? That's something that I think we need to address, and I'd like to correct that. Being quicker to engage law enforcement without the fear of we're going to get arrested for something. We need to build that trust within the community, and I hope that that's an outcome that we can take away from this. Our take-back events have been very successful. We're usually second or third in the state in the number of pounds of drugs that we collect. This last event that just happened, we were 320 pounds countywide, and that's in a quarter. So every 4 months we're doing this. So it's a successful program. Obviously Burlington with a higher population, they had a little over 1,000 pounds, but Bennington was third in that. So
we're really getting the word out, and that just doesn't get all these drugs off the street. It also changes people's ideas and their social norms about we need to lock up our prescription drugs, we need to take care of them appropriately, and when we're done with them, we don't let them sit in our medicine cabinet unlocked where people can take them. We bring them to a collection site. So we are having effects in that area. In closing, I just want to say that it's time that we stop operating within our individual silos. And I think that all of you here tonight is a message to us that is starting to happen. And so I think you all need to give yourself a round of applause for, first of all, being here tonight. But also truly being activists and not reactivists, where I didn't hear anyone in here today give a negative comment or say anything like law enforcement should have done this or shouldn't have done that. Everything was productive, everything was very constructive, and I know the chief and I will walk away from here feeling good about this, and also hopefully implementing some ideas that we've learned here tonight. So thank you all for coming, we appreciate it.
So another program that we heard a lot about today was the Catalyst program, or in some of the groups at least. So if Mike Harrington can come up and talk about that.
Good evening. I'm not on the agenda, so I'm going to make sure I'm brief because I know it's getting towards some people's bedtimes, and I can see people getting squirmy. There's a lot of conversation. My name is Mike Harrington, by the way, Economic and Community Development Director for the town of Bennington, and I want to present to you in just a few words some of the work that's been going on at the town for about the past 6 months. But first, let me ask, how many of you think there's more that can be done than what's been done already? Okay, good. We're pretty much in consensus on that. How many would say that we're not happy with the status quo in keeping things the way they are? Great. So we're in consensus on that too. And I think I want to just point out the importance of those two comments and the reaction to those two questions, because anytime you implement change, the only way the change is going to happen is if you're uncomfortable with where you are right now. And so the only way that any of this will take legs and actually become implemented and move forward will be solely based on the fact that we don't like where we are right now and we want to make a change. If we were comfortable and we were happy with the way things were, we'd all walk out of the room and we'd say good job and we'd put our stuff away and nothing would ever happen. And I know that's not true based on the conversations I've heard here tonight. Many of you may have heard this. I'm a strong believer in sometimes the best way to solve a problem is simply to take the first step. And so we can sit and talk and discuss and strategize, and at the town, we've been doing that for the past few months now about all the different things that could happen, but eventually it just came down to taking the first step. And so what you see before you is a preliminary program, a pilot program that we're looking to implement with the idea that from this small piece, it will grow into many other pieces, and that others may join in and other organizations and agencies may find that they have a role in this program. And so when we talk about the Catalyst program, our hope is that the belief being that we all need to be that catalyst for change. We all need to start the change rolling in either our neighborhood or our community or on our street or on our block. And so what we're doing from the municipality's perspective is first to say, let's identify those areas that are at the highest risk, those areas that present the most frequent and biggest problems. And let's begin to saturate those areas with resources, whatever those resources are. At the town level, there's a handful of resources that we can implement. Some of them are law enforcement related, others deal with code enforcement and the type of living conditions that people have. Others deal with different programs and resources that we can pull together, whether it be community outreach, community tip line, the idea that maybe we improve the infrastructure in a community, whether it's sidewalks and curbing and streets and lighting for safety. So there's a lot of different components that the town can take on itself. And then we'll begin to mix in those other pieces as well. And we've, over those past few months, have had conversations with people in the areas of health and rehab and prevention and treatment, because in all honesty, I'm not an expert in those fields either. And so I can only focus on those areas that ring true to me, and we'll begin to loop in others that have the expertise to tackle some of these other areas, much like what we did tonight. And so you have before you, and I'm not going to go through it piece by piece, but again, the idea being that we are going to focus on this idea of prevention, enforcement, and treatment may also include the recovery portion that we talked about tonight. We are going to look at targeting communities, neighborhoods, or streets that pose a continuing and deepening problem. And we're going to start directing resources, whatever the needed resources are for that street or neighborhood or complex or area, whatever you want to call it. And we'll begin to saturate those areas with those resources. And if you flip the page over, I think the other piece that I also want to point out is that one of the best things we can do, which we've talked about here tonight, is that the change has to start with us in the room. And so what is that going to look like? Our hope is to begin a program called EYES, or Every Yard, Every Street, with the idea that no matter where you live in Bennington, our children, our families, our mothers, our fathers should feel safe in their yard, on their street, walking to work, walking to school. And so the best thing that we can do as a community is begin to look after one another. And so our hope with the EYES program is that we begin to do that. Many of us are doing this already, but again, sometimes the best way to solve a problem is to take that first step. And so from the municipality's perspective, our hope is that we can begin to implement some of these programs. It's going to take a while. Our hope is that we can do this over the next few months, and you'll see things progress and ramp up over the next few months. But I hope that you'll join in on this conversation. We'll continue to have this conversation. And this, by no means, is the solution to all our problems. It's simply the first step, and we'll go from there. Thank you. Jim.
How do you prevent this program from potentially spiraling into a dangerous vigilante program?
Mm-hmm. I think that's a conversation we need to have. Our expectation is not that we need, and I've talked with the chief about this a lot, it's not about community watch. Okay, so there's a difference between enabling people to take on an enforcement role. It's probably much more like we see in all the airports and train stations and everywhere we travel when you hear that voice come over the loud system. If you see a suspicious bag, make sure you report it to the nearest console, you know, those types of things. And so I think what we need to do is begin to look out for one another simply by making sure that people have the avenue to, whether it's report a crime anonymously or have a mentor in one of our law enforcement agencies, or have officers more engaged on a specific street and building relationships like we've talked about already. So it's going to be less about the enforcement piece from the community, but making sure that those people who are on the streets and experiencing these types of dangerous behaviors or problems or situations feel comfortable in reporting those and knowing that they're going to be taken seriously. Great. Thank you very much, and we'll continue the conversation.
Thanks. So when I do something big like this, and we've been working on this a long time, like I said, the planning committee has been working on it since June. It's been a great event, but this quote from Mark Twain runs through my head, and I'm going to paraphrase it. It's, I'm glad I did it, mostly because it was worth it, but also because I don't have to do it again tomorrow. So I feel that way, except as I looked around the room tonight, there's so much great energy, and there's clearly a lot of community involvement and a community that cares here. By the amount of people who showed up, by the amount of passionate responses that we had in the sector work that we did, and the amount of really insightful thoughts that we had within those sectors too. And you can't replace that. Bennington County is going to have their own unique way of dealing with this problem, and maybe today was a giant new step in a different direction. That's what I hope for. But what now for you as an individual? So what will you do to challenge yourself, to get an energy around this situation, to get more people involved in helping with opiate substance use in Bennington County? We need more people, we need more ideas. I'll make a commitment now, which is that as we meet again with the planning committee, my proposal will be that we continue to meet as a planning committee, because that's when those ideas generate. And I'll commit right now that I will continue to go to those meetings, even if no one shows up. That's sort of my biggest nightmare, that I hold a meeting and no one shows up. Because when those sectors are in the room, that's when the magic happens, like we have noted several times tonight. So, I've given you your 5 ideas. I want to give out some thank yous to people. I'm getting to my last card where I have my housekeeping issues. We're going to get out early on a lovely fall night, and that's awesome, but not before a couple more things. The resource fair that's around the edges is here for a reason. If you have further questions, if you want to take resources and bring them to somebody, please see all the different areas that are represented here. There are all the sectors represented here. Prevention, treatment, recovery, law enforcement. Please go visit them, get the resources that you need. On the back of that card that I made you take, there's 211, Vermont 211. If you have specific questions about how do I get treatment, where can I find a recovery program, where can I find an AA meeting, anything like that, that's for Vermont 211. Where can I take my prescription drugs back, my unused unwanted prescription drugs back to collect them? All that information's on Vermont 211, so that's why that number's on there for you. We ask that you do the evaluations for us so we can really critically look at if we did a good job at this, if we want to replicate it, or what we want to do next. And we will send reports out for those the emails that you've given us about what our next steps are or where you can get some further information. There are definite thank yous to be had for the planning committee, who I don't believe I can name all of them, but most of them are represented in this room, so thank you to the planning committee. The Bennington County Prescription Drug Task Force, Take Back Task Force, was a big instigator for this also, so all the people who sit on that, which were a lot on the planning committee too, thank you for everybody on that task force. Like Sheriff Schmidt said, we just got the results today. Bennington County collected 320 pounds of unused and unwanted prescription drugs. That means there's more out there to collect too. So getting the news out so that we can collect them and hopefully avoid that first taste that Dr. Kloster was talking about, that would be ideal. The facilitators, who might have been nervous but did an awesome job facilitating each of the 4 quadrants, thank you very much. And Vermont Department of Health, who sort of guided us through this whole process after the governor has given us the directive to have the community forums. Vermont Department of Health was a great resource for helping us guide us to this event tonight and probably further on. So Chris Bongartz is here and Judith Fellows is here. Thank you very much. And I think that Judith, you wanted to take us out? No, you're all good? Okay, so you know all the pros in the area are going to stick around and answer your questions. Thank you very much for giving up your fall night. Thanks.